Your question with how I got to be here, which is at Charles Drew University, a historically black and the only historically black graduate institution that's west of the Mississippi. I was actually born in Malawi, which is a small country in Central Africa. My parents had intended to raise my family there. My mother was from the U.S., my father was Malawian. My father was also a professor, and in 1974 he was taken as a political prisoner, literally taken out of our home as a political prisoner. It's one of my early memories, that occurrence. After some months, it was very difficult for my mother to stay in Malawi, and so we eventually came back to the U.S. In 1975 and ended up living here. It's a great story. My father came back, and we eventually moved to Ohio, where he had originally done graduate school. And so that's how I came from a whole other country to growing up in the United States, and growing up really with a strong identity, though, for myself as an African American woman, as a black woman in the United States. I actually grew up in an all-white neighborhood and dealt with quite a bit of racism growing up, but that also gave me a lot of strength, and a lot of times my heroes as a young person were the people that I learned about in school. Now, unfortunately, I didn't learn a lot about them in school, but I learned them about people who were heroes within the African American civil rights movement. And so those historical figures have continued to have this strong influence on my life as I've gone forward in my work. I ended up coming out to Los Angeles to go to graduate school for many reasons, partly for a man, partly for the weather, partly for any number of other things, and ended up coming to Charles Drew University because of its mission of working with underserved communities. I've been doing HIV work for close to 20 years now in terms of actual employment, and I've always found the work in HIV to be compelling, is the best word that I can say. I started out working with an immunologist who was trying to understand why some women transmitted HIV to their infants and others didn't. And that was a very kind of clinical science kind of project, but my role in the project ended up being recruiting and involving women in the work, and I got to hear their stories. And it was really those women and their stories and their courage in dealing with a great deal of stigma, particularly at that time, that got me motivated to continue in this field. And I continue to be blessed by the people who do work in HIV, whether it's the providers, whether it's the people who are infected and affected themselves, or the participants that we work with in our studies, because it tends to be a group of people who understand adversity but have overcome it in a lot of very creative ways.